Hey, this is Mohal Joshi from Los Angeles, California. I follow Indian foreign policy and defense with a special focus on Asia. You can follow me on Twitter at Mohal Joshi.
Hey, this is Kishor from Bengaluru in India. I am an international relations expert specializing in global security, conflict resolution, and international negotiation. My focus areas include peace building and digital diplomacy. You can find me on Twitter at VeggieDiplomat. Hello and welcome to episode 43 of India Rising, Strategic Affairs Conversations with Mohal and Kishor. In this episode, we will look at the recent crisis in the India-Canada ties, starting with the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's statement in the House of Commons in the Canadian Parliament after the success of the G20 Summit in New Delhi in India. But before we delve into all that, we urge you, the listeners, to subscribe to our channel, India Rising, wherever you are listening to us. Also, if you are listening to us on YouTube, don't forget to press the bell icon to be notified about our new episodes. And lastly, if you have not left us a review, we urge you to do so as it helps other listeners like you in finding us. And now, let's get started. We'll quickly skim through the G20 Summit talking points before we move into the main agenda for the day. Now, as part of the G20 talking points, primary focus was on the joint statement, and everybody was keen to know if there would be a joint statement at all or if it would just be a chairman's message. India managed to have a joint statement with everybody on board. Unlike how things turned out in Bali in the previous edition, and this time around, the language on Ukraine was watered down quite a bit. Now, although the G20 members were able to forge a consensus declaration at the summit, it papered over many differences. Final document said that the states should refrain from threat or use of force to seek territorial acquisition, but there was still no explicit condemnation of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This was definitely a compromise among parties with varying views on the war. Contrasted with the declaration in Bali, Indonesia last year, simply because then China and Russia had acquiesced to a leader's statement that contained a forthright condemnation of the invasion. Now, obviously, there was a lot of drama. We wouldn't go into that drama of how things panned out and how India had to burn the midnight oil to get this kind of a joint statement out. We'll just skim through that, but then essentially we all know that there was the Delhi Declaration. One thing that was of interest was how Congress MP Shashi Tharoor opined on the success of G20 Summit, and I quote him here verbatim. The Delhi Declaration is undoubtedly a diplomatic triumph for India. It's a good achievement because right until the G20 Summit was being convened, the widespread expectation was that there would be no agreement and that therefore a joint communique might not be possible. We might have to end up with a chairman's summary. The reason for that in particular, the main reason was the big gulf between those who wanted a condemnation of the Russian war in Ukraine and those like Russia and China who wanted no mention whatsoever of that subject. India was able to find a formula to bridge that gap, and that in itself is a significant diplomatic achievement because when there is a summit without a joint communique, it is always seen as a setback for the chairman, unquote. Now, again, this kind of underlines the apparent success of the summit itself. In addition to the joint statement, there were a couple of other things that happened. One was definitely the inclusion of the African Union as a permanent member of G20, therefore G20 turning or evolving into G21. And Mohal, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so the G20 was expanded in this summit. So the African Union was expanded to the G20. So this was like a acknowledgement by the G20 to the growing African story, which is the fastest growing continent in the world. It also enhances India's soft power and further enhances also the voice of the global south, of which like India is trying to claim leadership of. Now this also is good because Prime Minister Modi has been conducting like a summit for the global south after taking over the baton of the G20 from Indonesia. And to match the rhetoric, the championing of the African Union, India has delivered on its promise. Also, uh, India has like is trying to mainstream the marginalized groups in the global uh, community of states, like which includes the African Union. Kishore.
Yeah, of course, India has been trying to lure and champion the cause of the African nations as well. Everybody knows about the vaccine diplomacy and how India tried to share whatever new vaccine had been developed in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. So, yeah, so it's been an ongoing journey, ongoing saga of India trying to be a leader of the global south. We'll move on. We'll also talk about an interesting consequential announcement that happened on the sidelines of the G20 summit. And this was the announcement of a brand new rail and port network, which would connect India to the Middle East and then further from Middle East into Europe and the US. It would be called India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, also acronymed as IMEC. Now, there was no leader from the participating countries who would mention the name of China, but then it was an obvious alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative, aiming to connect the whole world. I mean, the Belt and Road Initiative was aiming to connect the whole world to China through shipping, rail, and road, but this alternative that was announced was kind of an alternative to BRI itself. Now, obviously, this also kind of did not happen in one night. There were intense negotiations led by Deputy National Security Advisor Vikram Misri from the Indian side, and they kept discussing with four countries and other stakeholders. And as part of that, it was kind of hurriedly cobbled up at the end of the G20 summit. Now, where did the genesis begin? It was kind of 2 years ago when we talked about the I2U2 summit in one of our previous episodes. And at that time, the new formation of India, Israel, UAE, and the US, the I2U2, I think this corridor could find its genesis from that I2U2 summit that happened more than close to 2 years ago. And then eventually Saudi Arabia also became a part of that grouping. So obviously, there has been strategic outreach from India to not only the Middle East, but also to Europe and to the US in terms of having greater trade relationship, greater strategic cooperation and participation. And therefore, India's NSA Ajit Doval kept meeting his American counterpart and also from UAE and Saudi. And that way, they were able to achieve this new corridor. Also, as part of the new corridor, this would apparently speed up the India-Europe trade by 40%. And this kind of becomes even more important simply because India is now trying to become that new manufacturing powerhouse globally as part of the China plus one model. And that is where India hopes that it would be able to export a lot of manufactured goods to Europe and beyond. Now, as part of this, it's kind of interesting to note that this not only was a brand new corridor challenging China, but even more interesting was that this announcement brought Saudi, EU, US, and India all on the same page, again, which was quite interesting. How did China respond to this? China merely said that it welcomed the new corridor, but it also kind of said that it did not wish to see this becoming a geopolitical tool, which is exactly what BRI has ended up becoming. Now, all this as all this happened while Italy itself kind of announced, and Italy's Prime Minister spoke with the Chinese Premier on the sidelines of the G20 summit that Italy actually planned to pull out of the BRA itself. Now, China downplayed that proposal or that announcement from Italy, while also kind of um, welcoming the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor.
Yeah, I think so. As you mentioned, like I think if we go over the map, basically it's like the shipping from, let's say, like the port of Mumbai to Dubai or Jebel Ali in the UAE, and then I think the overland transportation through the breadth of Saudi Arabia,
Yeah, heartland of the
through
Arabian
yeah,
Peninsula. Yeah,
through rail and roads, and they would have to still to before they cross over to Israel, they would have to go through Jordan. So
Jordan.
they would have to get Jordan also on board, and through the port of Haifa in Israel, it would be shipped to Piraeus in Greece and onwards to European Union. So this also bypasses the Suez choke point, which probably will help increase the speed of goods transported. Also, interestingly, the INSTC, or the International North South Transport Corridor, which was linking it via the port of Chabar in Iran and onwards to Azerbaijan and Russia, onwards to Europe. Now, with the sanctions against Russia with the Ukraine war, and also the constant sanctioning of Iran, also brought a lot of complications where a lot of companies didn't want to work on the INSTC. So this would be like a parallel part to the INSTC, in addition to being a competition for the BRI.
Yeah, also totally bypassing Turkey. So that is an additional note that
Yeah, that's true.
Turkish president was not happy about. Anyway, we'll quickly move on. We'll that's enough of G20. We'll quickly move on to what Indo-Canada ties are now witnessing. There was a surprise statement by Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in their parliament. But before that, at the end of the G20 summit, Justin Trudeau remained stranded in New Delhi for almost 2 days after the plane he arrived on for the summit broke down. While he remained stranded, uh, there was this plane glitch drama which only added to his woes. Remember, the last time he had come, his visit was not appreciated by one and all. In fact, there were serious statements or downright damning allegations that it was kind of a clown visiting India. So he had a lot of ground to cover this time around, but looks like even this time around, there wasn't much improvement in Indo-Canada ties. But then once that happened, once his plane was repaired and he moved back, he immediately went ahead, and in their parliament he publicly criticized Prime Minister Modi for allegedly allowing anti-India activities of uh, extremist elements. Now, this obviously was a reference to Khalistan. Now, in the one-on-one between Modi and Trudeau, which happened along the sidelines of the G20, Modi kept telling or kept pointing out that there were anti-India activities of extremist elements that were happening in Canada. Now, again, Modi said enough is enough and don't continue this. Now, obviously, Trudeau kept harping on how Canada uh, attaches importance to freedom of speech, and therefore he cannot do anything with regards to that. Therefore, Modi and her government were obviously not happy with Canada, and he didn't get any more respect than what he would have otherwise deserved. Now, as part of all this, there was this cold vibes. He went back, and once he went back in their parliament, Justin Trudeau said that Canadian intelligence agencies are now looking into the allegations after Sikh leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a strong supporter of an independent Sikh homeland known as Khalistan, was gunned down on June 18th outside a Sikh cultural center in Surrey in the state of British Columbia. Now, his statement, and I read it verbatim, quote, Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen. Unquote. Now, once he said this, he not only brought up links between Nijjar's murder and the Indian government. Not only did he do that in the sidelines of the G20 last week with PM Modi, but he also brought it up unilaterally in their parliament. He also added any involvement of a foreign government in the killing of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil is an unacceptable violation of their sovereignty. Now, all this kind of set the stage wherein Canada would be upping the ante, telling you cannot kill one of our citizens on our soil, and this would be a clear violation of our sovereignty, and therefore we hold you responsible for this. And that was where not only did they do that, immediately after that, I think they announced that they would be assigning an Indian diplomat as a persona non grata. By that, essentially, it means that the Indian diplomat, whoever was that person, would have to pack his bags and go back home. Now, once that happened, once the statement was made, Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly, she chimed in. She said that the head of Indian intelligence in Canada has been expelled as a consequence. So we all got to know who was that Indian diplomat. Again, I read her quote. If proven true that if proven true, this would be a great violation of our sovereignty and one of the most basic rule of how countries deal with each other. As a consequence, we have expelled a top Indian diplomat. Unquote. In
I mean,
retaliation, on the very
I
same
mean,
day, yeah, go ahead,
Uh,
Mohal.
uh, yeah, so usually, like, see, when there's always this tit for tat expulsions, but what's kind of interesting is they name the Indian intelligence. Now, I mean, many times as a defense attaches, like there are people like who are working with raw or military intelligence. They're always working in foreign embassies. It's kind of known, but it's very rare that somebody would be called out as a head of Indian intelligence or named. Like, I think this only happened probably after just before the Bin Laden raid, where I think the US um, defense attaché in or the station chief, sorry, the CIA station chief in uh, Islamabad embassy was called out by the leaked. His name was leaked by the Pakistani press as a retaliation.
Mhm.
So this was kind of very unusual that usually like diplomats are not named or their position is not named. Like, I mean, calling out like a head of Indian intelligence is very unbecoming of a usually like a of a nation to do this in such a manner.
Agree. Now, obviously, in retaliation, India had to kind of return the favor, and almost immediately, the very next day, India expelled one of Canada's top diplomats, and this ramped up a confrontation between the two countries. Now, while all this was happening, MEA issued a Ministry of External Affairs here in India issued an advisory on Friday, which is September 22, as we record this podcast, that citing a sharp increase in incidents of hate crime, sectarian violence, and anti-India activities, it kind of issued an advisory to for all Indian nationals and students who were in Canada. So that way, India was asking its citizens in Canada to be on the lookout, to be watchful, and again, this was another way of upping the ante. Now, while all this was happening, there was quite a bit of stir in foreign capitals. Obviously, US, Australia, UK, all of them were asked about this mm, about this development, and everybody kind of tried to maintain neutral ground. Now, while all this was happening, again, Canada's permanent mission to the United Nations in New York said that while addressing that permanent mission to United Nations, Justin Trudeau said And again, I quote, as I said on Monday, there are credible reasons to believe that agents of the government India were involved in the killing of a Canadian on Canadian soil. There is something of utmost foundational importance in a country's rule of law in a world where international rules-based order matters. We have rigorous and independent judges and robust processes. So, Justin Trudeau was now kind of stepping down a bit.
Backpedaling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
stepping down a bit, backpedaling, and now was using words like credible reasons to believe that agents of the government of India were involved.
Yeah. I mean,
Now,
the most ridiculous part is that like he said, oh, I was not trying to provoke India, which is kind of so hilarious that if you have such a strong allegation, why would you even try to walk back? If you want to make a stand, then make a stand, but don't walk it back. And then suddenly, how does it become that I was not tried? When you are making such a big allegation as a prime minister of a big nation like Canada, if you say on the floor of the parliament, as in your capacity as a prime minister, that such a foreign government has assassinated your citizen, I mean, it would be like hilarious to see like the other countries going to cooperate with you, right? I mean, they're saying, oh, can you please cooperate with this to help us resolve this or further dig into this? But I mean, no way India is going after such undiplomatic language or such strong language, I would say. There's no way that India is going to now cooperate with Canada fully, given the circumstances of how things have played and how ugly this spat has become.
absolutely, absolutely. Now, all while all this was happening, there was a sudden development, and what was that? CBC News, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation News, came up with a claim based on some sources that the Canadian government had amassed both human and signal intelligence in a month-long investigation of the Sikh activist's death that had inflamed relations with India. Uh, we'll go through each part of that in detail, but then I continue with what CBC News said. That intelligence includes communications involving Indian officials themselves, including Indian diplomats present in Canada, as per Canadian government sources. The intelligence did not come solely from Canada. Some was provided by an unnamed ally in the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. So, this is what CBC News claimed. Now, if that was the case, then it meant that not only was Canada gathering human and signal intelligence, but it was also being aided by a foreign capital coming as part of the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. And therefore, not only were they having month-long investigation, but while doing so, they were possibly also tapping into the communication of the Indian diplomats, not only outside but also inside Canada as well. Now, this again was a serious breach of how diplomats are allowed to function in any foreign
I mean,
country.
when you are in a foreign country, it's pretty much given that your phones would be tapped and your communications would be compromised. I mean, but like given that India and Canada are not like, I mean, maybe the relations are not at the best at the moment, but they are not like enemies of any sorts. So it would be kind of surprise. I mean, it would be like kind of undiplomatic, as you say, but it wouldn't be surprising because I think all agents in like foreign countries are tailed by their local security agencies. I mean, the surprising part, I don't know if things will be ever given out because it might compromise their sources. That it would be very surprising if like two people from like Indian intelligence would be talking over a phone or an electronic device about eliminating somebody like a Nijjar. I mean, these are very very hush hush conversations, and they would be have been told to uh take the utmost precaution when even if they wanted to discuss it, and especially not use electronic devices, which I mean, given the amount of snooping, I mean, uh Canada or like even like a country like US, I mean, when they say unnamed Five Eyes partner, it would probably be USA. That would be the
Probably, yeah.
the guess. So I mean, given the widespread surveillance that like somebody like an Edward Snowden or something has revealed like a decade ago, they would be highly circumspect to use such a to I mean discuss such explosive details over like an electronic device and be snooped upon.
Yeah, agree. But then again, the point was uh, signal intelligence, human intelligence would not stand ground in any rule of law kind of a court proceeding, and therefore, again, people were wondering how on earth could Canadian Prime Minister jump to the conclusion and claim that Indian government was involved. Anyway, be that as it may, now while all this was happening as tensions kept ratcheting up, India also stopped issuing visas to Canadian citizens and told Canada to reduce its diplomatic staff. Now, in addition to this, Indian Foreign Ministry spokesperson also said that Canada is a safe haven for terrorists. We'll come back to this a little later, elaborating what was in that statement. But then this was an incredible comment, which is generally usually reserved only for countries like Pakistan, which kind of employ terrorism to engage with India. Now, be that as it may, Canadian diplomatic strength, which was 3 times that of India's, besides an extra mission, now they have been asked to bring the numbers down to parity. Okay, so that's with regards to the allegations and the quick response that we had from India. Mohal, you want to talk about who Nijjar was and kind of elaborate on why did things come to this point?
Yeah, so Nijjar, like I know like many in the Western media have been portraying him as an activist or a plumber, but like the impression in India is very different. I mean, yeah, I
Mhm.
mean like that is just like trying to explain away that he's like troubled history. So in India, like there is the allegation that he was a operative of the Babar Khalsa International, and he joined hands with other terrorist organizations. So, I mean, the allegation is Nijar also visited Pakistan to hold meetings with other Khalistani and ISI officials. Uh, he was actively involved in spotting, networking, training, and financing of various terrorist modules. I mean, even in like Canada, he had displayed images of Khalistani terrorists of the past decades, including Bindranwala. Now, in 2015, Niger even organized an armed training camp in British Columbia. I mean, there are like videos and pictures of him holding AK-47. Now, mind you, like it's not the United States next door where AK-47 you could own it with a license. Like this is in Canada, it is like kind of illegal to own this. As per my knowledge, like you couldn't own like AK-47s in British Columbia. So in spite of like such videographic evidence, like the government took no action against him. Even in 2016, as per reports, like he had sent some folks to eliminate like Shiv Sena leaders in Punjab, and the guy who sent was arrested by Punjab police, and the plot was foiled. So he was named in an FIR in India. Also, Nature with another fellow radical named Hardeep Singh Nijjar raised a squad of 4 killers of terrorists who carried out targeted killings of a Hindu priest back in India, and also abduction and gunning down of a sacrilege accused in Moga. So there's a quite a long list of folks in India. And I mean, even when in 2018, when Trudeau had visited India, Captain Amrinder Singh had shared a list of 9 high-profile individuals or terrorists who they wanted to bring to justice in India, and
Mhm.
Niger's name was on that list that was shared by then Congress Chief Minister of Punjab, Amrinder Singh, to Justin Trudeau.
Okay. Okay. Now, the thing out here was the selective hypocrisy in calling out the killings. Now, remember that you had Karima Baloch, a human rights activist from Balochistan, the province in Pakistan, who had come down to Canada and was trying to advocate for human rights in Balochistan. But then surprisingly, not surprisingly actually, she was found murdered in Canada. And when questions were raised, Canadian authorities said that they did not find any conspiracy in her death, and they kind of washed their hands of it. Now, Mohal, you were also mentioning before we started recording that the killer of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was also in Canada. Was that what you were
Yeah,
mentioning?
so from what I read, is that one of the killers of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman
Mm-hmm.
has been in Canada, and there have been requests since I think the late 90s to send him back to Bangladesh. But for whatever reasons, no action has been taken against them. I mean, so it's just like kind of hypocritical that like the country west of India and the east of India, all formerly known as East Pakistan, like Bangladesh, like uh like no action has been taken against them. So I mean, they have been soft on terror suspects, but again, like the hypocrisy is that basically, like, if Karima Baloch was assassinated, I mean, why was there was no hue and cry apart
Exactly.
from the Baloch activists? And on the other hand, like, why a killer of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman would be given protection or uh refuge by a country like Canada if it supports that, if it purports that like they are strong against like terrorists and criminals, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so we'll also talk about how Indo-Canada relations have been worsening ever since Trudeau took office. Remember that Trudeau has been the third time prime minister now, and his his term has not been good for Indo-Canada ties. Now, analysts point out to Trudeau's appearance at a Sikh event in Toronto in 2017, where there were separatist flags and posters depicting an extremist Sikh leader killed in 1984 Indian Army operation, which were being displayed, and Indian authorities kind of raised questions about that, to which there was no direct answer from Trudeau. But then Trudeau also had visited India in 2018 on a maiden trip, and he was generally given the cold shoulder when he visited. He not only got a chilly reception, but then PMO was also kind of put on its heels after it was reported that Jahpal Atwal, a Khalistani supporter, once convicted of trying to kill an Indian cabinet minister, had been invited to two receptions during Mr. Trudeau's visit. So again, all this kind of India felt that Canada was doing deliberately and needlessly needling India, and therefore India kept. I mean, India did not go out of its way to um please Trudeau. Now, while all this was happening last time around, even then, PM Modi met Justin Trudeau only at the very fag end of a trip. I think I remember there was a lot of chitter chatter on whether Trudeau would eventually manage to meet PM Modi at all, but then he
And
didn't.
whether he would get the customary Modi hug or not.
He would get the exactly, and then he also did manage to meet Punjab Chief Minister Amarinder Singh, just like how you mentioned, Mohal, and Amarinder Singh, Captain Amarinder Singh, had handed a list of the Khalistani operatives, asking, and in that list there was Nijjar's name also, and he had asked that Canada hand over the Khalistani operatives.
And
Mohal,
also
anything
back
else to
then,
add there?
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, also back then, just a year ago, when
Mm-hmm.
Harjit Sajjan, then Defense Minister of uh, Canada, had visited Punjab, like Captain Amarinder didn't meet him because he had accused then Defense Minister of sympathizing with the Khalistan movement, as like many of the Sikh leaders in uh, Canada have done. And so there was some apprehensions whether he would meet Justin Trudeau. Eventually, they did meet, and but similar to like what Prime Minister Modi, like there was a lot of apprehension. And this was not like kind of a a BJP thing. I mean, at that time, Kapran Amarinder was like in the Congress party, and obviously now he's in the BJP. But so it was like a cross-party thing where Indians didn't take too warmly to the Canadian delegations as far back as 2018. I mean, this was like across party lines, is what I meant to say. Kishore.
Agree.
So, some of the other measures that India took was like they are going to now review the OCI or Overseas Citizen of India status for many of the people who are the scanner of the Indian government, especially those who have been booked under UAPA or other terrorist designations. So there, I think in the coming days we can expect on a lot of OCI statuses and visas being cancelled by the Indian government. Also, India has reiterated that there are like around 26 extradition requests pending with the Canadian authorities. Many of them who have been booked under various cases in India. Also, as part of the wider crackdown, the NI or the National Investigative Agency in India released pictures of 10 people who were accused in the March 2023 of attack and vandalism of the Indian consulate in San Francisco, United States. And I think they're asking for more information on the general public. And then also like MEA has released a strongly word statement about Canada needing to worry about its international reputation in wake of these explosive allegations. So, I mean, the MEA, the foreign ministry spokesman Arindam Bagchi said that if you talk about reputation, and I quote, if you talking about reputational issues and reputational damage, if there is country that needs to look at this, I think Canada and its growing reputation as a place of safe haven for terrorists, for extremists, and for organized crime. End quote. So this is the kind of a very shocking statement that something you would attribute easily to Pakistan, but not for a Western democratic power like Canada.
True. Yeah. I mean, the kind of symbolic of, say, Italian mafia or uh, 50 years ago, how New York organized crime was. I think that Indian MEA is kind of pointing Canada to that. Anyway, do you also want to talk about the Kanishka bombing and how things have always been kind of rocky between India and Canada?
Yeah, so it's not like that, while there has been a severe downturn in relations, no doubt, over the past, let's say, 5+ years, but this has always been a recurring trend. So if you go back to 1985, and this is in the aftermath of the Operation Blue Star and the tragedy that unfolded in the Golden Temple. For the civilians, obviously, there were like terrorists like Bhindranwale who were to be eliminated by the Indian authorities because things had got completely out of control. So until like 9/11, the Kanishka bombing was the single worst act of terrorism in the air or the sky, where Sikh extremists like had planted a bomb aboard Air India flight 182, which resulted in the deaths of 329 passengers and crew, like when the plane blew up somewhere just west of the coast of Ireland while making a transatlantic journey. So I mean this was like 1985, so a lot of people don't have like very strong memories of them. Now what ended up happening was that the main suspect was a guy named Talvinder Singh Parmar. Now it's not like that Justin Trudeau has been like unique in kind of going soft on the terrorism part or the extremism part in Canada. His father, then Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, had a request from then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to extradite Palvinder Singh Parmar. Talvinder Singh Parmar. Sorry, my apologies. An Indian court had issued a warrant for Parmar. Like basically, he was involved in the killings of, I believe, like it was like two policemen, if my memory serves me right. Now, a formal request was sent to the Trudeau government, I mean the Pierre Trudeau government, and they had given some lame excuse about not recognizing that since India doesn't recognize the Queen as the head of state, the Commonwealth extradition protocol did not apply, which was kind of ridiculous to put it the least. Now, in July 1984, he had called for the killing of like 50,000 Hindus in addition to blowing up Indian embassy. So I mean, technically, he should have been on the radar for like explicitly calling for violence. Now, in August 1984, Gary Boudreau, I might butcher his name, of Calgary, went to the police. So now he was an acquaintance of Parmar, but he was also like a petty thief or criminal. So he reported to police that Parmar had showed him a suit, had given him or tried to bribe him with a suitcase bank of Canadian notes, which was like around $200,000. And he said like if he could plant a bomb on an Air India plane. Now obviously like he said like this was completely out of his league and he didn't want to get involved with killing so many innocent people. So he had reported that to the CSIS, the Canadian Services Intelligence Agency, but like who had taken no action. A month later, another accomplice, Harmail Singh Grewal of Vancouver, had informed of the same plot, but both the CISIS and the RCMP, I think the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, dismissed both of this as unreliable and the intelligence was ignored. Interestingly, even the CSIS agents who had followed Parmar and his accomplice Inderjit Singh Rayat to a deserted area in June 85. And they heard a loud bang, and which they dismissed as a gunshot, which is kind of strange that when somebody's under surveillance, how would you not uh, consider that, like, that he could be testing a bomb for all we know, and with all the other intelligence available to them. But the agents did not see fit to have the police stop and search the suspects. I mean, later on, it was revealed that he was detonating a blasting cap to test his bomb circuit. So these were like so many clues that they simply missed. Even another collaborator had visited a Sikh temple on 9th of June and warned uh, the Sikh devotees in the Gurudwara that, oh, it would be unsafe to fly by Air India, kind of hinting as to what was coming next. So this was completely botched investigation. Even after the plane went down and the bombing, the unexpected, I mean, it's like beyond mind-boggling that out of the 210 tapes, so there was a lot of electronic surveillance on Parmar and Rayat and the collaborators, and they had around 210 tapes of telephonic conversations. Now, for whatever reason, 156 out of the 210 tapes were erased or like destroyed for unknown reasons. And even after they were suspects post the bombing, they continued to erase these tapes. So it was like kind of shocking that like the whole investigation was a whole comedy of errors. Unfortunately, 329 people had to lose their lives over it. But I mean, even like with such a tragedy happening, I think what ended up happening is that a lot of the I mean, even though there were like around 280 Canadian citizens, but they were like Indian origin people. So at that time, didn't create a lot of outrage in like Canada, and like it was conveniently forgotten. Even the public inquiry which started what was an incredible 21 years after in 2006, and that too under a conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper. And what ended up happening, like the main suspect Parmar like was kind of killed in an encounter with Punjab police when he returned to India, but only one of them, Inderjit Singh Rayat, was convicted, and that too of a manslaughter. And later on he was released for good behavior, like maybe two-thirds of his way in his conviction. So it was, I mean, they have been very soft on terror, no doubt, but this is just kind of the whole litany of issues there. How the whole investigation, they could have stopped the bombing. I mean, interestingly, they had planned to put two bombs on two planes, but the other plane, which was an Air India flight, which stopped over in Tokyo and Narita Airport, the bomb blew up while on the ground. Uh, I mean, two baggage handlers lost their lives. I mean, technically, they didn't account for daylight saving that Japan didn't observe as Canada. So thankfully, like the whole plane didn't blow. Otherwise, we would have a terrible tragedy with two Air India planes would have been blown out of the sky in like middle of 1985. Kishore.
Quite a sad evolution of India Canada ties. Anyway, now that Khalistan is not more of an issue in India itself for more than 2-3 decades, it's kind of lingering along us a diaspora issue, not only in Canada primarily, but also to some extent in the United Kingdom and also in Australia. Mohal, you want to talk about how it's kind of finding feet in all these places, primarily in Canada?
Yeah, so at first, like I want to read a paragraph from an op-ed by former Punjab Chief Minister Amrinder Singh,
Mm-hmm.
when he talks about talking with the diaspora interaction who return to Punjab like for their travels. So, and I read like quote, tens of thousands of Punjabis who are settled in Canada and who keep traveling to the native place, whom I have got many opportunities to meet, have always been categorical about keeping a distance from the extremist elements. They are fond of their roots. They love to travel to India. They can move in any part of the country. They visit the Sikh holy places spread across the length and breadth of India outside Punjab. They are least interested in what people like Nijjar have been doing and promoting. Trudeau needs to take fresh lessons about the Sikh diaspora and its political preferences and choices. End quote. So this shows like from experiences like politicians like Captain Amrinder Singh, like the former Chief Minister of Punjab, like this is doesn't have much resonance in India. Even if you look at domestic politics in India, in Punjab, I mean there are these few and far between elements who are like pro Khalistani, but most of them, like the vast majority, have want nothing to do with it. Even if you look at the Pew Research survey for like people who are in India, like people who identify as Sikhs, like 95% have a strong affinity towards India or like have pro India views. So it's like the very tiny majority who I mean, and like see, we it's not like there is a systemic issue. Most of them, I mean, as you know, like the Sikhs are a proud race. They have done a lot of contributions to like the Indian armed forces, the Indian parliamentarians, the Indian overall society, Indian businessmen. So it's like a very minor issue, but unfortunately what has happened is like the vocal minority has is like overshadowed the vast silent majority who want nothing to do with it. Now,
Yeah.
coming back to the diaspora issue, uh, I mean, there's little organized support for a separate homeland. Obviously, there are this small vocal minority. Now, what has happened is like, and then there are like several like articles or podcasts describing like, so Canada's like domestic battles. Like, I mean, a lot of the politics has been run through like local like gurudwaras or associations. Now, what ended up happening is many of the overt or extremist elements have taken over these organizations and they control the money and the funding which eventually flows to the politicians. So basically like the liberal party politics, uh they have been like more focused on like where they can get the funding, where they can the vote. So like even though there are like only 2% of the population, like all of the politics, I mean many seats, let's say in like a British Columbia or like Ontario, they are controlled by like which way the Sikh diaspora votes. So they have been, the politicians have been pandering to these elements, and as suffered obviously a great reputational damage by like pandering to this lowest common denominator, like and then they are trying to play up these grievances of this vocal minority to win votes, but obviously it doesn't make for good foreign policy. Now also what ended up happening is like in the last election, there was a new party formed by like Jagmeet Singh, who was like, I mean, everybody says like a soft corner for Khalistanis in Canada. So now Trudeau has is in an alliance with NDP because they don't have the pure majority. So now Trudeau sees that eventually, like if NDP corners the whole Sikh vote, then he could lose even more seats and he could be in the minority in the next election. So not to wanting to lose Sikh votes to NDP and further erode his political positions, he tried to probably go to the left of NDP by making such explosive allegations. But I mean, this has kind of backfired on him because it has damaged the overall arc of India Canada relations. And I mean there's also like a tinge of racism in this, that I mean the West is kind of lecturing that India cannot do, but I mean a country like US, they could take out, let's say, like an Osama bin Laden, or even like keeping aside like uh, hardcore terrorists like Osama bin Laden, like I mean Qasem Soleimani, like the head of the Quds force of Iranian Revolutionary Guards, who I think we discussed in one of our previous
Yes.
episodes.
Yep.
I mean, they could be taken out with a drone strike, or Anwar Awlaki, like another preacher, like who was against the US. I mean, they could be taken out, but like if India does anything like that, I mean, they are totally up in arms about like I mean like how dare like India take out terrorist threats against their homeland, but like the US is well within its right to do, like I mean they must have done thousands of drone strikes in the Pakistan Afghanistan border. So it's just like double standards where like one is okay, but like if like the white people folks do it, it's okay, but if the brown folks do, like it's it's I mean like even like Israel and Mossad, they have taken out lot of targets in the West, and there has been uproar over it. So but this is like kind of interesting that India has never like overtly I mean no one has claimed that India overtly assassinated leaders. I mean if you look at the reports, I think there have been at least half a dozen reports in the last 6 months where Khalistani or anti-India people have been eliminated by, I mean, by rival gangs or whoever they want to claim, like whether India has a hand on it. So India has been proactive on this part, but like there is a lot of evidence that needs to be presented by Canada before this would be proven to be like a reliable stuff. And Canada is also stuck in a bind, right? That I mean, India has banned the visas, but now what can Canada do? Now, if they stop the students from coming, because I mean, 40% of Canadians universities give admission to Indians. So if there's a tit for tat reciprocal, I mean, they stand to lose billions of dollars. So India is also kind of flexing his muscles with his growing stage on. Clout on the international stage, that that if you like make a serious allegation, we won't take it lying down, and we will also hit back.
Yeah.
And then also the the diaspora element, like the Canadian politicians for a long have given a free run to these extremist elements. I mean, they don't understand the Indian angle. That see in India, I mean, we had a lot of insurgencies, like the Khalistani insurgency was, I mean, in its heydays, like probably like we lost like 4 to 5,000 people per year. I mean, that's more than what happened on 9/11, to put in perspective for the Western audiences. Now, if like I mean, India, we lost like a prime minister, Mrs. Gandhi, unfortunately, due to this. And we lost 20,000 people, like security forces. I mean, if you look at the South Asian terrorism portal, like, I mean, and I can share the numbers later on. We lost like 20,000 people, and we lost 20,000 folks and a prime minister to terrorism. So India is going to be like it's a touchy subject in India if there is a revival of Khalistani movements, or if shelter is being given a place like Canada. So I mean, if somebody like Canada, or like a US had lost like 20,000 people to terrorism over a period of years, and lost a prime minister or a president, God forbid, then they would have a better understanding why India gets so upset about Khalistan. I mean, many people in the West fail to understand the nuances, that this was a serious issue back then, just like the Kashmir issue. We lost like few thousand people every year. So they have to understand that where we come from, granted it was in the past, but we don't want any sort of revival. I mean, India has anyways a lot of issues to deal with, but they will get uh, worried about any such developments where a lot of these elements are given a free run in a country like Canada. Kishore?
Agree. Okay, quickly before winding up, we'll also talk about political ramifications within India from a national security perspective. Now, either way, this is bound to help Prime Minister Modi in an election bound year. Domestically, of course, while irrespective of whether India actually commissioned this killing or not, and whether the BJP government asked their diplomats to be involved in this or not, I think while the top people in the government will continue to deny this and therefore call this as a foreign conspiracy. Now, the lower rung of the party might continue to claim this as something of an achievement by the current dispensation, by their party in power, and therefore they might claim that they are kind of quote unquote carrying out surgical strikes within Canada as well. So I think that way politically, the BJP will obviously milk this to their advantage in the election as the country heads into Lok Sabha elections 2024. Now, while all this, obviously, Modi and his style will be likened to Mossad style operations in foreign lands. Now, from the perspective of the opposition party, Congress, I think BJP has long alleged Congress to be weak on national security. Even Congress actually came out in support of the Indian government amidst all this. Jairam Ramesh, who has been a vocal critic of BJP for a long time, he also put out a statement and said that the Indian National Congress has always believed that our country's fight against terrorism has to be uncompromising, especially when terrorism threatens India's sovereignty, unity, and integrity, and our country's interests and concerns must be kept paramount at all times. Again, a very strong statement coming from Jairam Ramesh. Another MP from Congress, Shashi Tharoor, said, and I quote him, "It's a very disappointing development." He was referring to Prime Minister Trudeau speaking in their parliament. "It's a very disappointing development. I don't quite understand why the apparent need on Canada's part to cater to a particular political lobby in that country and has resulted in their publicly putting their entire relationship with India in peril. But we now must take steps to ensure that it does not deteriorate any further. They are an important trading partner. Now there are escalating threats against the safety and security of Hindu Indians. And I think that once Canada has unleashed this, they should be very conscious of the dangers they are provoking, including for importing a kind of extremism that does not exist in India anymore, in Punjab, into their country instead, which is very, very unfortunate. So I would urge Canadians to also take a deep breath and rethink what they are doing." Unquote. Another Congress MP, Ravneet Singh Bittu, I think he is the grandson of former Punjab Chief Minister B.N. Singh, who himself was killed by Khalistani terrorists. Ravneet Singh Bittu, MP, said that Hardeep Singh Nijjar was the right hand of those who had actually killed his grandfather. So I think that way, politically within India also, this has kind of let all parties sing a common tune. And I think we will continue to hear this more often as the nation heads into the Lok Sabha elections of 2024. Mohal, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the last comment about Ravneet Singh Bittu brings up a good point that not only we lost a prime minister, unfortunately Mrs. Gandhi, but we also lost a chief minister, Bian
Yes.
Singh, to this terrorism. So those 20,000 people, we also have like a prime minister and a sitting chief minister who was assassinated. So I think this strengthens the point that Canadians have to look at from the Indian perspective, that there have been very dark days and it took somebody like KPS Gill to bring the situation under control. So I mean, there has to be a greater appreciation of like what happened in India and why they don't want this to happen. And again, as you said, I think Congress party, I mean including us, there have been a lot of harsh critics on national security, but I think they also have seen what has happened to their former prime minister and former chief minister, and I think this is something we want to applaud them. Like, they have taken an uncompromising stand, and they've been speaking in a similar tone, unlike many issues like maybe a Ladakh border standoff and stuff like with China, where everybody has spoken in the same. I mean, funnily, I mean, this has kind of united all of India across political party lines, because they have seen like what has happened in the past and they don't want a repeat of it. And I mean, as you
Yep.
rightly said, that let's say if these allegations are not proven and BJP will just milk them saying like a foreign conspiracy hand, like which I mean every prime minister since maybe even Mrs. Gandhi has alleged like foreign conspiracy when it came anything against us. So but let's say if it was proven, then as you said, like you know, like Modi, many of his supporters like 36 inch ki chhati, like a 50-inch chest, like you know, so it just proves his macho credentials if case there was evidence. So I think it's
Obviously.
kind of a like a kind of a like strangely to like a win-win situation with these allegations from Trudeau. I mean, so let's see how it. I mean, the relationships are at like I think they've never been lower with Canada. I mean, as we record on this Saturday, sorry, this Sunday, sorry, Friday evening. My apologies. I mean, things could take turn for the worse for the timing. I mean, let's see. Maybe there are some rumors that maybe Trudeau. I mean, he's served 8 years. Maybe he might get replaced in the future, and maybe there might be a turning point of relations where more could be done to salvage this relationship. I think it's gone in. I mean, not even deep freeze. Maybe like liquid nitrogen kind of cold freeze for the immediate future. But I think things, I mean, they see India and Canada are not like enemies like India and Pakistan. We don't have a lot of opposition. Obviously, there are these some elements which are not favorable to India and in Canada. So maybe a different government would take more proactive action. And I think relations can be restored in the long run. I mean, after all, we are like big trading partners and friendly nations. So is a temporary blip in the history of India. But I think in future things are bound to improve. I mean, but it will take some time for this repair work to be done. I think there has to be a lot of closed door, backdoor negotiations. Right now, things are broken to an um, I mean, nobody would have thought it would have broken this bad. But let's see. I mean, more. Let's see in the what happens in the near future. You know, Kishore.
Yeah, agree on that. Okay, so I think we've kind of covered everything that we had planned for today. Dear listeners, to continue hearing about such interesting topics, do subscribe to our channel India Rising wherever you are listening to us. If you are listening to us on YouTube, please press the bell icon to get notifications about new episodes. If you have not left us a review, we urge you to do so as it helps other listeners like you in finding us. We would also like to hear from you if you have any suggestions on topics that you would like us to cover. Do remember that these topics should be directly related to Indian foreign policy. Until the next time, this is Mohal and Kishore signing off.